Today I learned that there's beauty in reaching for something. It doesn't matter how big it is or how far away it seems. I saw people from all different walks of life together gathering around the top of a mountain to watch the sunset. And being there was like taking part in some sort of sacred ritual, a ritual based on the idea of change. But there was one couple who looked out in a different direction, down the length of an avenue that was also changing, an avenue I hadn't fully explored yet. I thought that if I could understand this one road, maybe I could better understand this entire city, a city that thrives on the idea of change. I looked up the origins of the word avenue. It dates back to 15th century France and translates to the act of approaching, and that's perfect. I'll turn Central Avenue into my own way of approaching Phoenix, and I'll explore all 15 miles of it on foot. This afternoon, I learned that a bridge can be a musical instrument, but it only plays for the people who walk across it. I also learned that you can find warnings in unexpected places. I'm starting to notice that warnings hide in plain sight. They're everywhere, only time makes them look innocent. It wears down anything that reminds us of right now, and then the danger seems far away, in a different time. I read that in 1891, a flood split the city in two. People who could afford it moved north of the river to higher ground, and everybody else stayed south, where the water could still reach them. It's taken 2 bridges being built and destroyed to finally connect North and South Phoenix. But how much has really changed for the people on either side? This morning I saw a statue of a man dreaming. But what was he dreaming about that he didn't already have? He had the floral shirt, the bucket hat, the first page of a novel, and was able to sleep through the sounds of life happening all around him. Wasn't that the look of leisure on his face? Or did I see something different? Maybe a man dreaming of the day he would finally wake up. And if he did, would he notice the changes around him? Or only the things that have stayed the same?
You know, what are the chances of clothing that similar? And so again, we're not talking about a uniform, a military uniform, but we're still talking about a uniform of sorts. We're still talking about that short hair. All their hair is in bobs. A little girl up on Hopi would not have her hair cut like that, especially up in their homelands.
It only took one look in her eyes to see that this was the same girl I had seen as a child, with her hair cut short, standing in front of the boarding school doors. I've heard that time heals all wounds, but what if the wound is kept open by the memory of time? Today, my tour of the Phoenix Indian School was cut short. The curator had seen a group of teenagers surrounding one of the buildings and ran outside to see what they were doing.
We're from Central Christian Church.
They were on a scavenger hunt, young students combing through the engraved bricks that the curator herself had engraved when she was a student there.
You know, when you don't acknowledge what was here and why it happened, then you erase that history of what really happened here.
In an empty business park, I found symbols of love carved into a tree. There were so many of them, and some were cut so deep that the names looked like stitches sewn into the bark. I wondered how many of these relationships had lasted over time, knowing that the marks they left would outlast them all. There was a fountain where the water was shut off, and the erosion and residue were clearly visible. In the chaos of the colors and lines, I saw places I had visited only hours earlier, reproduced from my memory as abstract expressionist artwork. There was the fish from the Bluefin Teriyaki Grill, the nude sculpture from the Flynn Foundation, and the view from the intersection of Central and Van Buren. If water was the artist that recreated my memories, then its own memory must be everywhere, flowing through the canals of a prehistoric civilization and filling the lawns of another. Water remembers, and it connects us through time and space. Getting easier to pick out the traces of self-preservation. Today I met a man by the river who kept his blankets in black garbage bags, protected under the weight of heavy stones. When I asked him about the area, he mentioned seeing a fire there on Monday and that he was worried about the ducks he had been feeding.
I've had them as they were babies. They're that big. There's 10 of them, yeah. I feed them every day. Girls are mostly picky. They'll bite you when they're hungry or hit you with their chest and on the back.
I asked him if he had given them names.
No, none of them. Can't get involved with nature.
Is it a contradiction to sustain life and still remain uninvolved? In the pond set aside for wildlife rehabilitation, I saw the reflection of power lines in the distance. There was a demonstration wetland with demonstration animals, and a waterfall with no water. But just across the street, I've learned that even the most obvious contradictions are straightened out in the flow of time, no matter how slow or how small. I've just reread a short story by Jorge Luis Borges, and in it, the map of an entire empire was made, matching every object in reality with one in representation. Only a generation after, the map was discarded, leaving ruins of its existence in the deserts of the West. This makes me wonder how long any map can retain its meaning in the face of time. Can we create a cartography of change? And what would that map look like? A series of pressures, forces, dark and light, hot and cold. I imagine the measurements of a universal thermometer, noting the correct balance and equilibrium of all matter, and bubbling over when one side loses its ability to counteract the other. How high has the mercury risen in Phoenix? And which side are we pushing for? Or pressing against? Today I witnessed the heat of one man's anger and what it can do to a building. But I also saw that the flames never reached high enough to destroy the idea of the building itself. The sign read, "Moving Arizona Forward," but time had dated the goals of the words below, still pushing for a victory in last year's election. Had I stumbled upon the center of the political spiral? What would a goal for the future be worth if there wasn't a problem in the past to justify it? Maybe in a long enough election we would all be winners and losers, and only time would stay victorious. On March 9th, the polls were open, and two young progressives offered me coffee. They had been there all morning, but they were happy to talk to me about their prospective candidate.
As Phoenix grows, since we're one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing city in the country, we need to make sure that growth is sustainable and equitable. And I think that Yasmin can bring a really good voice to council to make that happen. We have a pretty strong paid canvassing team, and we have like high schoolers in there. We have young college students, people who are like very much like want to go into politics, and people who don't really have interest in it but love Yasmin and want to like fight for her. You know, I think there's always opportunity for more and more change, and you know, if Yasmin wins, that's going to be even more possible.
Was it the promise of more and more change that helped Yasmin Ansari win the election? As I stood in her newly won district, I looked over images pasted on top of the crumbling bricks. Maybe change was the philosophy that allowed Phoenix to win, remaining visible on the same desert soil where other civilizations disappeared. And what about the losers? They may be silenced, but they remain eager to roll the dice on the chance for more change, a chance to win again. There's no end to this cycle, but eventually a question arises. Does anyone really win if someone has to lose? And how can we talk of winners when in this month of March alone, more than 500 protesters were killed in Myanmar? A car bomb in Somalia exploded and killed 20 people. An earthquake with a magnitude of 7.0 struck off the shore of Tohoku, Japan. World commerce was halted by a shipping container lodged in the Suez Canal. And the number of deaths from COVID-19 grew to almost 3 million people worldwide. But this same month, I watched two friends begin a business together. They detailed cars out of the back of their van for people who would rather stay home during the pandemic. When I asked them how much work it would take to make my car look like the one they had finished, I only received a laughing response. Or Balthazar, who started selling used clothing on the side of the road when rent became too expensive. I purchased a linen shirt for $5 and made a friend. But he wanted everyone to know he also sells mattresses, microwaves, and refrigerators, which he moves and transports himself. I also met the owner of Easy Bachi, a moving hibachi grill that stops at a new parking lot every week. He said he was learning the city one meal at a time after moving here from California. It seems like during uncertain times, the only form of security that these restaurants and vendors have is mobility. I learned that to survive this way takes creativity, patience, and more than just a little bit of persistence. But I also saw something lost in the empty storefronts of Phoenix. We place so much of ourselves in our physical surroundings that they end up containing the memories of a city.
These are sisters. He started a series of these. Originally, he had two little girls sitting down playing with jacks or whatever on the floor, and he called them the sisters. Then, a couple of years later, he came out a follow-up of that, and now the two little girls are grown up, and he made one with two girls. One is helping the other ones comb her hair. They're getting ready to go out on a date. They are now teenagers. The sisters were growing up. Now they're teenagers. The follow-up to that one is, okay, now one has her baby, the other one's going to have her baby. They're still sisters. And then there's one more. They're now old women sitting down, gossiping with each other. Sisters at the end. An idea. It's not just a piece of beautiful work that he does, very fine detail and coloring and all, but a whole series of things that they mean. I am 101 years old. I feel good. I'm still working, and I enjoy it. I've been doing it for so many years. I get up in the morning at a regular time and I do my thing, you know, and I get dressed, like this, you know, come down and park, you know, I got certain schedules for whatever I do, you know, and routine-wise. I think it's important, because if I didn't do that, you know, I don't have to be here anymore. I could just close up and go home if I have to. But then what will I do then, you know, instead of getting up in the morning to get ready to work, I would say, no, I don't have to go sleep another hour.
5 o'clock on a Friday, a sacred time in the life of any American. But as I watched the weekly routine end, I noticed that the stirrings of another had just begun. cars in order to maintain our lifestyles, but what kind of maintenance does a relationship with a car entail? In an area with over 4 million people and 2 cars per household on average, how well do we really know the strangers in our driveway? Yesterday I saw car parts hung like animal bodies on meat hooks. They had numbers on them like 454 and 9-43. This made it easier to think of them as lifeless pieces of steel, or the mechanical producers of greenhouse gases. But how many less cars would sit around in dealers' lots if we invested more in caring for the cars we have? And what would these new emotionally maintained vehicles look like? I met an artist who was repairing one of his paintings. The words read, "I love Phoenix," and watching him work was like witnessing an image come to life. The graffiti that was left in red spray paint began to disappear with each new stroke of his brush, and as it did, I wondered what separated a work of art from a work of vandalism. What makes some things beautiful and other things banal? What's the difference between art and advertising? Holiness and homeliness? Progress and destruction? The more I walk, the more I find it harder to tell. Things like a lawn being prepared at the edge of a desert preserve, or a park being made out of industrial scrap, walk a fine line between creation and destruction. I saw a group of pigeons who placed the fate of their species on the edge of a demolished overpass. Even though the walls were coming down around them, they were still attempting to bring beauty into the world. I was given a guided tour of the Uptown Farmers Market this morning. Carmen and Alexa walked me down the rows of tents, and we looked at the different items for sale. Both Carmen and Alexa's nails seemed to match their drinks perfectly, and it struck me that the market thrived on the spirit of accessorizing. This morning, the most popular item to have on one's arm was a dog, and I wondered what was the difference between a pet and an accessory. The difference is that a pet suffers emotionally without the right amount of attention, but both bring us a sense of validation, and people seek validation in many different ways.
When he laid his life down, he became sin for his people. He shed his blood as the atoning sacrifice, and then rose again from the dead on the third day. In Christ, we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins according to the riches of his grace. It is by grace that you are saved through faith. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. Today, if you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts as in the rebellion. It's a plan for man who wants to die, but afterwards is destruction. Instead, to be judged according to their works by the things that are written in the book.
¿Cómo se llama ese programa? No, están de noche. Déjame te perdón que te interrumpa. Porque yo me acuerdo que dónde chingón me metí. Ahí, güey.
There were certain street corners in South Phoenix where the mood was set by smell. Each grill had their own time-tested recipes for marinating the meat, and the aroma came alive above the heat from the charcoal. It was a sharp contrast from the smell of dirt rising from the construction nearby. There were hand-painted signs on the walls of the shops and the restaurants. No two were the same. But somehow, someone managed to fit them all in identical white boxes on identical blue signs that marked the progress of the South Phoenix light rail extension.
You can see my shop is really organized and really clean because I am window tinting. Window tinting, the dust and the animal hairs is the number 2 enemies. Estoy ocupada, Yaritza. It's my breakfast. I'm sorry. I'm not political person. I'm not worker, social worker. I'm nothing. I'm just a mother of home and worker, and that's it. They put the tractors and the big cars in front of my business. They hiding me. My customers, they ask me, "Are you open? We don't see you. I thought you are closed." I try to survive. They're not gonna broke me, but it's hard when your councilmen don't wake up to speak in favor of you. They pretended to defend you, and communities like District 7 and City of Phoenix, they know these people don't care voting. This district is the district who have more lack of interest to voting in the elections. And I hear it in the meetings that I have because I want to defend my community to bring the money here if the light rail cancel, because this is the most abandoning community. This is why they don't have mercy with these light rail. Because if you can see in Camelback and in other places, they increase the traffic lanes. But here they decrease. Because they know who vote and they know who don't vote. Who can affect them in the election, who cannot. But they know South Phoenix, they're a piece of cake for selling to rich people, millionaire who wants to do something here. And they want to demolish the property for make those kind of apartments or condominiums that you see everywhere where is the light rail.
There was a building in the area that stood out from the rest. Its architectural aesthetic was listed as regional postmodern. Now I know the name of the style that's invaded Central Avenue. Pigeons don't pay rent, but they can still get evicted. For over a year, the building at the corner of Central and Camelback sat vacant. All of its upper levels were gutted and left open for anyone to look in. But this won't be the case for much longer. I saw thick panes of glass being installed at the penthouse level, a clear sign of things to come.
Big high rises, the rent, don't know how true it was, but I had heard what one of them was going for at the penthouse. It was over $7,000. You could see just the clientele's
Why is it that we associate high class with physical height? Is the cost of an apartment only measured by how many people live on the floors below? Thinking vertically requires raising people up, but these new heights we climb leave more room to fall. And not everyone is blessed with a sturdy pair of wings. They had been there since sunrise, unloading and redistributing hundreds of pounds of produce. All of them were volunteers, and each of them seemed to have a specific job to do. Even the children found a part to play.
This is my son, and one of the cars didn't want to stop, and he yelled, "Stop!"
But there was one man whose movements took on a machine-like quality. There was only one moment when his systematic movement was interrupted. But after a quick reevaluation, he was once again on the move. Age has the benefit of time, using experience to create workable patterns. But youth is given the gift of a clean slate. Every experience is new until it's been done before. And this creates an atmosphere of adaptability and optimism. I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you've not dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence, hovering there. I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where never lark nor eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind, I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. As a child growing up in a Catholic family, I was told to pray to God for protection. It seems strange to me that I should place the safety of my family in something I couldn't see, when danger was clearly visible. Now it seems like protection and danger have become one and the same, existing on both sides of the same street. I think about the first bullet ever made, and how the second bullet was created to protect from the first. I imagine every bullet throughout history springing from that first piece of lead, and wonder if there are too many now to forget that they ever existed at all. There seem to be so many other ways to protect oneself in the world. At both ends of Central Avenue, I found gated communities. Each house had a view of the mountains, and some were built so close they could have walked into the desert from their backyards. Instead, the fences turned the mountains into scenery. There to look at when you wanted them, and easily forgotten when you didn't. As I explored the grounds of a horseback riding ranch, I was approached by a woman carrying a saddle. I asked her if I could film the horses, and she told me they were mules. Today I learned never to confuse the two in front of someone who runs a stable. They spend so much time around these animals, becoming familiar with them through their work, and even though they provide a source of income, these horses have lives and personalities that exist long after the customers leave.
The best definition I've ever heard of what a human being is a feeling animal that sometimes thinks. As a nurse, I would be trying to save somebody's life. That's the main driving force, but it can get corrupted if you get too ethereal. You have to keep it to a reality that is significant. That's the difference. Military is chop chop. You got to do it. You got to do it last night. I think a lot of times the younger the military is, the less likely you're going to have bureaucracy. Over time, bureaucracy becomes the plague of survival. It's the plaque that gets on the inside of the blood vessels of a country. You get individuals who create kind of little empires in their own little sphere. And at the VA, more than I have in the military, because the military is more about getting stuff done. Esprit de corps is what they call it, but it's really about getting stuff done.
It seems like getting things done is the philosophy behind Phoenix's progress. Like a military operation, I saw areas that looked completely evacuated. There were barriers in the streets sectioning off the roads and redirecting pedestrians. I saw propaganda on the temporary fences, hung there to manage public expectations and approval. I felt the ground shake under the wheels of heavy machinery, moving supplies across emerging battlefronts and demolishing whatever stood in their path. But these machines wouldn't be able to move without a human hand holding the controls. As I watched the way we took hold of the technology around us, I began to wonder who was directing who.
I got all different kinds of skates, dude. And they're like, oh, it's too big, oh, it's turned off. But like, no, it's more than that, dude. You just put wheels on your feet. Like, how much more futuristic is that? You can just like do whatever. It's just a dance. And I work at a prosthesis lab in the morning, so it's like, it's very parallel, man.
Approaching station, Central Avenue.
Today I saw a man on the metro train with a mobility scooter and thought about the 2 levels of transportation he relied on to survive. While everyone focused on their phones, he paid careful attention to each and every person who boarded the train. Was he able to see something that we were all too distracted to notice? Even though we were all going the same speed, heading in the same direction, we were moving through time in different bodies, with different experiences. Technology attempts to average out these differences. But is difference really something that needs to be erased? What if we could learn to appreciate mobility in all its forms, when we all have the same road to travel?
Approaching station, Thomas and Central Avenue, Midtown.
There were birds in the trees above me, shaking the palm seeds to the ground. As I watched them eat, a group of street pavers walked by, using hot asphalt to fix the cracks in the road. They must have been out in the sun all day, working safely beside the hundreds of traffic cones that were laid out for them. But as they worked, I saw that new cracks were already forming. So how can a city heal if it's in a constant state of change? Or is change the only way it can? I must have seen 1,000 Phoenix sunsets in my life, and every time it still feels like the first. I know it's the same sun setting in the same sky, but am I the same person? My memories of Central Avenue already seem distant. Holding them in place is like trying to capture the last light of day in the palm of my hand. Knowing that even now, as I write this last entry, everything continues to change. Tonight I watched the spine of the city come alive. Taillights buzzed like neurons firing messages into the night, connecting the little cells that were part of a much bigger organism. I think I finally found a reflection of myself in this city, knowing that tomorrow I'll have grown a day older, learning more about myself in the process of changing, and forever searching for another avenue.